astronomer, so I'm actually not someone who does photogrammetry, although, as I'll mention later, it's actually becoming easier and easier to do. And I am not a cave or geology expert, but I am someone who has helped produce live dome programs in our photo theater, the Gates Planetarium at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And so I want to describe how we've used photogrammetry to produce compelling content for domes and what that audience experience was like for the programming that we created. And so this came about actually in the fall of 2021 when we partnered with the National Park Service in the United States, and they were ramping up to promote their Year of Caves and Karsts. And so what we decided to do in our collaboration was to try and recreate the experience of visiting caves for a dome audience. And we chose Carlsbad Caverns, which is in southeastern New Mexico. So it's very accessible in the sense that the Park Service has created trails that people in wheelchairs can access, but it's still about a 2-hour drive from the nearest large airport. So it's not, that easy to get to. And so this made it sort of a great place to do our experiment, to do photogrammetry and put it into the dome. We had a National Park Service ranger and a former ranger and researcher, expert in caves, who actually did the presentations. And this was a very successful series of programs. Now, before I jump into how we actually did this, I just, since I'm the first speaker, I just wanted to give a very quick overview of photogrammetry. Michael mentioned that this has been something that's been important in the last couple of decades, but in fact, if you look at the history, the roots of photogrammetry actually go back to the last half of the 19th century, and that's where the early ideas first fomented. But it really took off with the invention of flight. So with balloon and aircraft pilots, we took pictures of the landscape below them, and these photographs were used to create the first photogrammetric models and to estimate the sizes and scales of landscapes. And photogrammetry really appeared to audiences really by the late 20th century when it was used in visual effects. And so an example of that is David Fincher's Fight Club, where virtual models in several shots were created with photogrammetry. And so we're seeing a kitchen where thousands of pictures were taken of the set, put into visual effects shots, and you had a virtual camera that could wander throughout this virtual model in places that a real camera couldn't. And so photogrammetry became a really important part of visual effects work. And that leads us to Eric Hansen, who comes from a visual effects background, and you'll learn more about him later on because he's one of the 3 panelists today. But we ended up working with Eric to perform photogrammetry at Carlsbad Cavern, and he took literally thousands of pictures from multiple sites, typically about 1,500 for some of the larger complex scenes, down to a couple hundred for the smaller and simpler geometries. And by taking these multiple pictures, you can reconstruct a 3D mesh, a 3D model from those 3D pictures, from those pictures. And because you're using those real images to texture the models, you have the real color, the real lighting, and the shadows baked into the scene. So you don't have to try and recover that in your shot. Now, in Carlsbad, visitors are actually restricted to a path that winds through the canyon or through the caverns, and you can sort of see I'm highlighting this dim path with my mouse. Hopefully you can see that. But what that means is that because the camera shots were also restricted to that path, the camera couldn't look everywhere. And so if you move through the virtual scene, the scene does break down. And so here's where we can see the backside of these models that Eric has helpfully filled in, but they're not really textured and they're not really correct. But that's one of the aspects of photogrammetry that you have to be aware of. Now, a little bit of background for the caves. For that, we have to actually go back 260 million years to a ancient reef. And unlike the reefs of today, who I have to mention coral reefs, corals exist are not in the form that we know them. So these reefs were formed by sponges and other shell animals. And the reef built up over time where living layers grew on top of the older layers, crushing them below. These dead layers combined with calcium carbonate to form limestone. Over time, ocean sediments filled in to surround the reef. And then the oceans dried up about 20 million years ago, and tectonic forces pushed these formations up above the ground. The surrounding ocean sediments eroded away, and that left you the Guadalupe Mountains, which is that limestone reef, that fossil reef. Now, there are multiple caves that have formed, but instead of water coming from above and eroding the cavities that make up the caves, what happened was that hydrogen sulfide from beneath the earth, below the surface, reacted with water, with the groundwater, and that formed sulfuric acid. And it's actually the sulfuric acid that eroded the caves. And then later on, you had water trickling in that then precipitated out minerals to create the cave formations. So that only happened in the last million years, less than 800,000 years. And then over time, because the water table changed, what happened was if the water table stayed the same for a period of time, you would have sulfuric acid forming from the water that would then excavate out these large level caves. And that's how you have some of the largest cave formations in the world. And one of the ways that you can enter the cave is through this natural entrance, which is which you can take via this paved path via a series of switchbacks. So this is just a picture of that entrance that I found on Wikipedia. But what's great about, again, photogrammetry is that you can reconstruct a scene or a view that's very similar to that photograph, because you're, again, using the actual images that you take to recreate the model. And furthermore, you can explore that model in a way that you cannot in real life. And so what we're able to do is we were actually able to fly up to an alcove in this rock overhang that's about 100 feet above the trail at the bottom. And you can actually see a raptor's nest up here. So that's what these sticks and twigs are inside this little opening. And so this is a place where a bird of prey has made its nest. And this is not something that you would be able to see in real life unless you had climbing harnesses. In the visitor center, there's a model of the caves. This is sort of like a tabletop model that's waist high, but one of the things that we can do with the photogrammetric version of this model is actually fly in, and really had to sort of hinted at this, but the idea that you can actually go in and get a sense of a very different scale. So here we've actually shrunk down to the size of that model that we're exploring. And then, of course, we can do that with not this fake model of the caves, but the actual caverns themselves. This is something known as Chinese theater. And again, the visitor and the camera is restricted to a path that's outside of this cavern. But in the model inside the dome, we can fly into this cavern and see this popcorn structure up close. And then what's also really remarkable is that this structure, the opening is only about 4 feet, so about 1.5 meters high. So again, we're seeing something not only that you can't see from the path, but we're also shrinking ourselves to see this detail. This is the big room, which is the largest area inside Carlsbad. It's about 8 acres or more than 3 hectares in size. So that's equivalent to about 6 football fields or 6 football pitches. And the ceiling is at a maximum height of about 250 feet or close to 80 meters. And again, visitors are restricted to the path that you see below, but once we created the visualization, we can fly around and visit different aspects of the cave. A lot of the geometry does break up, but because there's so much detail here, the visitor or the audience doesn't necessarily notice that in our live presentations. And instead, we can have them focus on what's immediately ahead of them, such as these ice cream scoop-like features in the far ceiling, which are a result of the gaseous sulfuric acid etching away at the walls. There's also a cavity opening in the ceiling called Spirit World. And this has been noted for decades, ever since European Americans started to explore the cave. And they there wasn't a real easy way to get up there, but the Park Service staff were very innovative. And so they came up with a scheme to use helium balloons to lift a balsa wood frame attached to parachute cords and climbing rope. And they were actually able to get up there. You can actually see the climber as that small figure up against the bottom edge, or towards the bottom half of the screen. And so Eric was able to attach a climbing rope, a digital virtual rope, to the model. And again, this is a way of telling these stories and having the audience experience what it must have been like to be part of the action. As we're finishing up, I just wanted to show a few more examples of features that we can't normally see. These could be off trail, these could be high up, but again, with the photogrammetric models, you can fly up to see the bacon drapery features, which are caused by lines of water dripping and leaving mineral formations. And finally, this rimstone dam is created by pools of water that again form these rippled stone formations, but in the dome we can fly right up close to the surface and see some of the mineral formations. So some of the takeaways that we've had from our live events is that what's amazing is that, Eric has a virtual reality app that he's been using photogrammetry to populate models of cultural and natural heritage scenes. And the same workflow that creates the models can result in models with very little modification can be used in our dome as well as in VR. Now, the experience in VR is very different than in domes. So you have a single person exploration in VR with sort of a mass audience tour. But what we find is that you have benefits in both. In VR, you can explore by yourself, but it is very isolating as an individual. And in some ways, it's less immersive just because the field of view of most headsets are typically about 90 degrees. Whereas in the dome, you can see 180 degrees around you, but you don't have the ability to move around yourself. You're basically seeing a guided tour. But one thing that we have learned through this process is that photogrammetry is getting easier. We hired Eric to do this, and he gave us some amazing visual effects quality results. But there are more and more practitioners who are doing this sort of cultural and natural heritage preservation work. There are phone apps that Ken, one of our other speakers, will be talking about, that you can create photogrammetric models yourself. And what that tells us is that there are rich opportunities for planetariums, for natural history museums, for other institutions who may not have the technical expertise in-house, but they can partner with people who have the expertise and who have the knowledge about these spaces, and they can help you put on events.